Hello, welcome to the latest webinar in the Asian Carp Canada series. My name is Christine Pinckney. I'm the Asian Carp Project Officer at the Invasive Species Center. So before we start, I'd just like to let you know that all participants are in muted mode during the broadcast. And after the presentation, there will be a brief question and answer period. If you wish to ask a question, please type it into the question box during the webinar, and our presenter will try and answer as many questions as she can with the time remaining. Also, this webinar will be recorded and will be available for viewing on our website at www.asiancarp.ca. If you have difficulty during the webinar for technical difficulty, please contact Lauren at ltonelli@invasivespeciescenter.ca. So the Invasive Species Center has partnered with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada to develop the Asian Carp Canada project. The project includes this series of webinars focusing on the issues surrounding Asian carps. The Invasive Species Center is a nonprofit organization that connects stakeholders, knowledge, and technology to prevent and reduce the spread of invasive species that can harm Canada's environment, economy, and society. We also work with a broad range of stakeholders to help identify needs for knowledge, tools, and resources, coordinate and support projects that contribute to invasive species management, and build competencies with NGOs, students, and new grads. And we share this information to raise awareness and empower citizens to take action in their own communities. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Becky Cudmore. Becky is the manager of the Asian Carp Program at the Fisheries and Oceans Canada. In this role, she oversees all prevention, early warning, response, and management activities to protect the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes. She is also Senior Advisor for Central and Arctic Region on aquatic invasive species. Becky has a postgraduate degree in zoology from the University of Toronto and degrees in biology and environmental science from Trent University. She's also the recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award for her contributions and efforts to protect the Great Lakes from aquatic invasive species. Becky has worked in aquatic invasive species in the Great Lakes for almost 20 years. So in today's webinar, Becky's going to talk to us about Fisheries and Oceans Canada's Asian Carp Program, what activities have been involved with the program and their successes, and discuss where they go from there. So Becky, I'm going to pass the presentation over to you.
Well, great. Thanks, Christine. First, I just wanted to thank the Invasive Species Center for the invitation to present today and for organizing and hosting these informative webinars. They've been really interesting and very useful to date. For anyone who doesn't know, they are available recorded on www.asiancarp.ca. And second, I want to thank everybody on the line. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to hear about Fisheries and Oceans Canada's Asian Carp Program and where are we now. So I've broken up the presentation into 3 parts. I'm going to provide a little bit of background, some of the program achievements to date and what we've been working on, and also plans for our final year, which is coming up. I know for the most part, I assume most people know about Asian carp by now, and that's why you're here. But there's always a few people out there that don't know a lot about them and wish to know more. So I just want to get everybody onto the same page. I'm going to provide just a brief background about the threat of the Asian carps posed to the Great Lakes, as well as a bit of background on the program itself. So moving forward. Asian carps, we do mean 4 species when we say Asian carp. I think a lot of people are surprised that there are 4 distinct species. And these 4 species are the grass carp, which eats aquatic plants, bighead carp, which eats the small animals in the water column, like zooplankton, silver carp, which eats algae or the phytoplankton in the water column, and black carp, which eats mussels and snails. All 4 of these species, as you can see, do grow to be quite large, over a meter in length, and reach anywhere from 40 to 60 kilograms. So where are they native to? They are native, all 4 species are native to the lakes and rivers in China and Russia. And how did they get to North America? Well, they were brought over in the 1970s for a variety of uses, for biological control in aquaculture farms. For example, black carp are used to control snails in catfish farms, but also grass carp. Grass carp is really good for controlling aquatic weeds in farm ponds or other systems, and so they were brought over to stock in those systems. And also they've arrived to different places as well, because two of the species, bighead and silver carp, are found in the live food trade. The purpose, of course, is to be presented on a dinner plate, but we have had instances where fish that are available in that live food trade have shown up in the wild. And as you can see by this animated map, since their arrival into North America and flooding out of these farm ponds or through stocking, these species have been moving up the Mississippi River Basin and towards the Great Lakes over the past couple decades. So what have some of the impacts been of Asian carps in areas where they have established? Loss of diversity in the native fish species, and loss of habitat, for example, wetland plants by grass carp. A lot of damage to commercial nets. We've seen a decline in the fisheries value. The Asian carp are a low dollar value fish compared to some of the native species in the areas where these species have been introduced. And of course, what they're most famous for is really the silver carp, one of the species, has caused injury and boat damage by this jumping behavior. And I apologize if it is choppy, but Google YouTube silver carp jumping, and you'll find videos, many videos out there. So where are Asian carp now? This is a map of where bighead and silver carp are, courtesy of our friends to the south in the US. And you can see that established populations are still 143 kilometers away from Lake Michigan. There is some activity between this established population and where the star is here, this electrical barrier. So a lot of work is being done in the US in this area to minimize the numbers of population and to reduce impact. Black carp, luckily, a little further away, and is found almost 500 kilometers away from Lake Michigan right now, 143 kilometers from the barrier. And grass carp is a little too close for comfort for us here in the Great Lakes. As you can see by this map, they have been found in the Great Lakes Basin. And of course, there is evidence of reproduction in the western basin, southwestern basin of Lake Erie. So this proximity of these species to the Great Lakes Basin and to Canadian waters did raise a lot of concerns in the last few years. And in 2010, the Fisheries and Oceans Canada was asked to work on a risk assessment to better understand what the risk to the Great Lakes was and to provide science advice for management activities. We felt that it was really important, since there's no brick wall at the border in the Great Lakes between Canada and the US, that this risk assessment should be binational in scope. And so we engaged colleagues with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission and the US Geological Survey to work with us on this project. Large document, but it really does boil down to this one slide, which indicates that if no additional actions were taken, that the overall ecological risk to the Great Lakes was high, and that risk was especially high to the Central Lakes, so Lake Michigan, Huron, and Erie. And the impact of those species would be directly related to the ability of that species to establish. Therefore, preventing establishment was noted to be critical. In Canada, where we don't have an established population of Asian carps, the advice was that we should be focusing on preventing introduction. So this led to a program, a 5-year program that started in 2012, where the goal was to protect the integrity of the Great Lakes Basin by preventing the arrival, establishment, and spread of all 4 species of Asian carp. The program was built on 4 distinct pillars, the first being prevention, where risk assessment, research, and outreach activities were conducted, early warning surveillance, response, where we would establish and align response plans with other agencies, conduct analysis on captured species, specimens, and also, of course, implement action. The 4th pillar is management. In this case, the work that we focused on was management of potential pathways of introduction into the Canadian waters, the Great Lakes. And all of this work is done out of the Asian Carp Lab, where here in Burlington, Ontario, and just some photos of our lab. We also updated a lab in Winnipeg to conduct any genetic work that needed to be done. So moving forward and looking at some of the program achievements to date, I'm just going to walk through some of those activities by the 4 different pillars. So first, prevention. As I noted, it's broken down into 3 different categories. The first, outreach, education, media. The second, risk assessment. The third, research. So looking at some of the outreach and education media and why we wanted to include that, we really do feel that these are key components of a prevention-based program. And some work that was done by the Invasive Species Center that conducted a survey on Asian carp knowledge in Ontario residents indicated that this was a smart thing to do. While 58% of Ontario residents that were surveyed knew Asian carp are invasive, only 3% knew there were 4 species of Asian carps, and only 12% knew they were not established in the Great Lakes. 77% of respondents didn't know how to report invasive species correctly, and 77% thought Canada should be spending more money to prevent Asian carps from entering the Great Lakes. So you can see that this is a very important key aspect of our program. We broke it down to target different categories of the public. And we're working with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, which is one of the oldest and largest nonprofit, non-government fish and wildlife conservation organizations in Canada. They had a highly successful 20-year Ontario Invasive Species Awareness Program, and we thought it made sense to work with them and their established stakeholders. So to date, OFA has made over 72 million impressions, and impressions is an advertising metric of viewed displays, with their Asian carp-specific outreach and education initiatives. And this was done under agreement with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And some of these initiatives included billboards that were posted near border crossings and high traffic areas. That led to over 65 million impressions just in 2014. They've posted over 200 awareness signs on Asian carp at water access points across 80 communities in Ontario. And they've conducted Asian carp outreach at over 100 trade shows and events each year since the program started. They've also developed public service announcements that are aired on radio and TV. And since April of 2014, these public service announcements have aired over 800 times, leading to over 7 million impressions. 14 issues of Ontario Out of Doors contained ads such as this one that reached 90,000 readers. There was also 4 issues of the Angler and Hunter Hotline, where ads reached 80,000 readers. And ads were also put into 38 newspapers across Ontario with a total circulation of 2.3 million homes. It's also important to increase awareness of Asian carp and how to report sightings through an online and social media presence to make sure we're reaching all segments of the population, and I do mean the age groups. So we've done, so OFA's done over 20 Facebook posts, 44 tweets. They've had over 1,500 views of Asian carp videos on YouTube, and they've received over 100,000 visitors to their invading species website annually. And of course, they've also developed and distributed or downloaded thousands of Asian carp information pamphlets, stickers, window clings, and watch cards. We're also lucky enough to work with the Invasive Species Center, and they've introduced themselves at the beginning of the webinar. They increased the online and social media profile of the Asian carp issue through an Asian Carp Canada Facebook page, as well as an Asian Carp Canada Twitter account. They've also developed, on behalf of DFO, a website, www.asiancarp.ca, which is a central resource on Asian carps in Canada, which has seen over 13,000 visits, 73% being new visitors, a lot of page views, over 27,000. And interestingly enough, we were able to see just in the last year, in 2015, an average website traffic doubling from 20 daily visitors to 40 daily visitors in less than a year. And you can see that down in this graph at the bottom. And they've hosted and archived these Asian carp webinars that have been attended by over 400 people to date. Some other interesting work that's being done to get the message of Asian carp out to the public is Invasive Species Center is hosting an innovative solutions competition shortly, just in a couple weeks, March 5th, 2016, that asks university and college student teams to develop innovative solutions to prevent the entry or control of Asian carps in Canadian waters. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. That is open to the public, and you can get more information at asiancarp.ca. They've also developed a Spot the Difference campaign that was geared to the public. It was put into Owl Magazine, Explorer Magazine, Outdoor Canada. A lot of that was focused for children, but it was also put on to Toronto subways at the end of last year and received a lot of attention. And of course, it's important to take advantage of a resource that we have in Toronto, the Royal Ontario Museum, one of North America's highest rated natural history museums. They have developed an Asian carp exhibit in their biodiversity gallery. And that exhibit includes an informational video on the history and potential impacts of Asian carps to the Great Lakes, life-size models of all 4 species, and what they call touchable materials. They have rubber fishes, a life-size big head carp cutout so people can take pictures with their large catch. And as well, they have Asian carp teeth and skeletons for visitors to touch and learn from. And just in December, over the holidays, the ROM averaged 7,000 to 8,000 visitors a day that went through this gallery. So we were able to reach a lot of people and provide a lot of information on Asian carp. We also do a lot of media interviews, DFO staff for TV, print, and radio, as well as interviews for books. We have been featured on The Nature of Things with David Suzuki, and also in the film Carpe Diem by Rockyenta Productions that was aired in 2013. The Asian Carp Program staff do participate in community meetings, workshops, and stakeholder meetings. We do get invitations, and we're happy to come out and talk to people about the threat Asian carp pose to the Great Lakes and how to identify them and what people can do to work with us on protecting the Great Lakes. DFO also provides direct communication regarding Asian carps to the Canadian public through 2 of our Twitter accounts. And it was noted by our communications manager that of the topics tweeted from our DFO Central Twitter account, the top mentioned and retweeted posts were about Asian carps. So a lot of interest out there by the public on this topic. So moving on to the risk assessment aspect of our prevention pillar. I did mention our 2011 binational risk assessment for bighead and silver carp. Following that was a social economic assessment that was done that looked at what we stand to lose in the next few years should Asian carp establish in the Great Lakes, and boiled down to looking at the value of boaters' consumer surplus and the foreign expenditure associated with recreational boating specifically, within the amounts of $43 billion in 20 years and $95 billion in 50 years. They found that there would be a significant redistribution of wealth within the Great Lakes economy, that industries that depend on fisheries resources of the Great Lakes could experience significant losses. And those sectors that would suffer the greatest impact by the presence and establishment of Asian carps would be the commercial, recreational, and subsistence fisheries, recreational boating, beach and lakefront use, and wildlife viewing. For example, a lot of that wildlife viewing is done in wetland areas that would be at risk by grass carp. And speaking of grass carp, so some of the work that we've been doing in the last year and a half has been focused on a very specific risk assessment for grass carp. Again, we decided to do it binationally, and we're working with Great Lakes Fishery Commission, U.S. Geological Survey, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It says undergoing peer review. It has finished peer review, so we just need to finalize the other documents, and that should be available soon to provide science advice to better inform management activities on both sides of the border. We've also outlined another binational ecological risk assessment, this for the last Asian carp species, black carp. That's been completed, and we worked with scientists and managers around the Great Lakes Basin to scope out and develop the parameters that this risk assessment would take place. Looking at some of the research that's being done or has been done, we do a lot of research that helps inform the risk assessments that we do. So a lot of the work that's been done to date has focused on informing the binational grass carp risk assessment. We've done a temperature and size-based model to assess what the survival of young of the year would be over winter, because that's a key component for species to persist in the environment. They do have to be able to survive over the winter. We're looking at movement dispersal models of grass carp in the Great Lakes, looking at time frames between 1 and 50 years. We're looking at a laker, so ships that move within the lakes, a model to predict the potential for spread of early life stages by ballast water between lake ports. And we also looked at broad-scale Great Lakes submerged aquatic vegetation inventory, and we're using that to model where grass carp could establish populations based on food availability and what the level of impact would be with different densities of grass carp and what that impact would be on vegetation biomass. So what would the impact be to wetland areas? We're also looking at the dependence and use of those vegetated habitats, those wetland areas, to look at what portion of the native fish and aquatic bird communities would be most impacted should grass carp establish in the Great Lakes. There's also research being done on fish movement, asking the question, do fishes move through canals, and could canals potentially be used as control locations for unwanted species to prevent spread, as well as to prevent spread? So we had two study areas, the Welland and the St. Mary's River, where a lot of large body fishes, and I will flag no Asian carp were used, were tagged and released. In the Welland Canal, almost 4% of the tagged fishes did move through the locks and out of the canal and into either Lake Erie or Ontario. In the St. Mary's River, just over 5% of tagged fishes moved between the lakes using the locks and rapids. So the take-home message here is that the frequency of movement, while the frequency of movement between the basins is low, fishes can use these artificial waterways as movement corridors within the Great Lakes Basin. So this could provide an opportunity for control or containment to protect one lake from a potential population in the other lakes. And how would we contain? What kind of containment mechanisms would we use in areas? So while the goal of the program is to prevent the introduction and establishment of Asian carps, it would be foolish to wait to do this kind of research until we had a problem. So we're starting the research now, looking at non-permanent barrier control techniques so that we can better understand what could be employed in what areas to prevent the movement of Asian carp. So we've looked at to date electrical barriers, pressure barriers, low frequency sonar, sound, bubble, light, and alarm pheromones. And this complements a a suite of work being done in the United States by the U.S. Geological Survey by providing data for a mid-size environmental system. And that system, as you can see in this bottom left photo, which is really a boat slip with a net across the end, it strongly mimics a canal. And a canal could be a very logical location to conduct containment activities or to prevent spread of Asian carp. There's work being done on environmental DNA, which is looking for genetic material in the water column. This work is being done at our Winnipeg lab and with the University of Manitoba, and they're looking at sampling strategies for the routine monitoring of rare species, and this would include early arrivals of aquatic invasive species. They are also looking at streamlining collection and filtration methodologies based on some of the research that they're doing out of this lab. Moving on to the second pillar of the program, early warning. This is probably the most significant level of activity that we conduct within the program. And the reason being is that it's really important that we detect early arrivals of invasive species as soon as possible, because we have more options to deal with them rather than to wait until they're established in the system. And how we do this is we used science to model what tributaries would likely attract Asian carp for spawning. And we go to those sites, we scout them out, make sure we ground truth them, make sure what we are seeing in person makes sense with what the computer models say. And if those are reasonable sites, we set those as our early detection sites. And so over the course of the program, we now have 34 early detection sites established in the Great Lakes, and we revisit those sites depending on the level of risk those sites pose. We'll visit them 1 to 3 times a year. And you can see by the graph over here that the number of early detection sites varies by lake, with most of our early detection sites being in Lake Huron and followed by Lake Erie. At those early detection sites, there are field sampling sites, and the number of field sites sampled within our early detection sites has nearly quadrupled since the beginning of the program. And the number of fishes captured has increased from about 21,000 fishes representing 84 species at the beginning of the program to last year over 67,000 fishes representing 97 species. So our efforts have really, in early detection surveillance, have really increased over time. And the gears that we do use traditional gears to conduct our early detection surveillance. At the beginning of the program, we had 4 gear types. We had bag seines, boat electrofishing, fyke nets, and trammel nets. And trammel nets, actually, our program was the first to use trammel nets in Canadian waters. So it was a learning experience for us. But by 2015, we've expanded to 8 gear types. So now we have, in addition to the 4 above, we have 3- and 6-foot hoop nets, trap nets, and tied down gill nets. And we're also using integrated gill nets and electrofishing techniques in a cooperative targeted sampling protocol. We really have grown with our experience over the years in conducting early detection surveillance. Now the hope, of course, is that we don't find any Asian carp. But if we're not finding any Asian carps, how do we know that our gear is working? So we use surrogate species. We use buffalo species because of the body shape, size, and similar habitats and similar feeding methods. And so buffalo species were detected, over 1,000 of them were detected at 14 early detection sites, and the gears that work best for them were the top 3, trammel nets, tied down gill nets, and boat electrofishing. Common carp is another surrogate species, probably not surprising to those of you that know the Great Lakes well. They were detected at all 34 early detection sites. The gear that worked best for them, the top 3, boat electrofishing, tied down gill nets, and trap nets. And that's over the course of the program, those numbers. In addition to the early warning surveillance activities that Fisheries and Oceans Asian Carp Program staff conduct, we also do the public to help us with more eyes on the water and alert us to any sightings. And the number of potential Asian carp reports to the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters Invading Species Awareness Program. They have a reporting system of an app, smartphone app, a website, and a hotline. Those reports have greatly increased over time, as you can see by the graph here on the left. So in 2013-14, we had 7 reports, and then last year we've had 99. So over the course of the program, there's been 141 reports from the public citing what the potential Asian carp. I'd also like to note that the eyes on the water also include our anglers as well as our commercial fishermen. The avid anglers, our commercial fishermen, they do know when something isn't right, and when they catch a species and they know it to be invasive, they do immediately contact authorities. So moving on to the third pillar of the program, while we are hoping we don't catch any Asian carp, if we do need to have some sort of response to that. And that's the third pillar of the program. I'm going to talk a little bit about Triploid and Diploid. We can also say sterile and fertile. Triploid fish are sterilized. They contain 3 sets of chromosomes. And diploid fish are fertile fish with 2 sets of chromosomes. And knowing the reproductive capability of a captured grass or black carp, just those 2 species would have this issue, is an important piece of information for management response teams, as the urgency level and the type of actions that would be taken would vary with reproductive status. In 2013, in order for us to find out a captured specimen was a fertile fish or a sterile fish, we had to send biological samples to the U.S. for operational processing, and that took up 2 to 9 days after capture before we received the information. Not that the U.S. was the issue, it was the fact that those biological samples were eyeballs and they got held up at the border an awful lot. In 2014, the Asian Carp Program developed the only Canadian capacity to run those biological samples from Asian carps in order to assess the reproductive ability of specimens captured in Canadian waters. And now we have results available for management response teams within 2 hours of the specimen arriving at the lab. So we've really improved the ability to get this key piece of information out to management response teams. We use the Incident Command System, which is a structured system that's implemented during any emergencies. Oil spills use this response, firefighting uses this kind of command system. And we use this kind of command system as well. So our staff has been trained on the Incident Command System, and each event does allow us to provide input to strengthen protocols to be used in future events. CFO does work with the province of Ontario to lead and implement Asian carp responses in the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes, following a draft joint protocol between the agencies. And collaboration with the U.S. is a key component of the Asian Carp Program. Obviously, we share those waters. We have the same goal to protect the waters of the Great Lakes, but we also think it's important to share information on response activities as well as the biological data of fish captured in Canadian waters for use in research projects. We've done binational on-water mock exercises to practice implementation of response activities, and we did that in Michigan in 2014. And you can see here we've got DFO, we had State of Illinois, Province of Ontario, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife all in this one picture. And if we do find Asian carp in the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes, we do take action immediately. In 2013 to 14, we had caught 3 fish in the Grand River, so right here on Lake Erie, and all 3 of those fish were sterile. 2015 was a bit of a different story. We had 9 fish caught that summer. We had fish in the Toronto area, Jordan Harbor, Bay of Quinte, Point Pelee, and 1 was found dead on the Niagara River. Of those 9 fish captured in 2015, 6 were fertile, so 6 were those diploid grass carp. and they were the first recorded diploids in Canadian waters. So for those fish that were captured, we did implement the incident command system. And just to provide you with an example of the amount of effort that work takes, we had 3 different agencies involved. So the federal government and the provincial government do co-lead, but we were lucky enough to also have the participation of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. And for the grass carp 2 grass carp that were captured in July, we had 7 boats out in the water. We had over 20 staff on site per day that conducted over 550 man hours on site. There was an additional, at least from DFO's side, an additional 182 hours put in, and that does not include the additional hours put in by the other 2 agencies off-site as well, which was significant. There was 19 hours of electrofishing done, over 10 kilometers of nets deployed, and 14 trap nets were set, 11 fyke nets were set. This did garner, and for those on the phone probably remember, a lot of significant media coverage. This is a picture here on the side of the 3 agencies' boats taken by a news helicopter. And obviously we did as well get significant public interest, a lot more calls to the invading species hotline, and a lot more emails and questions to the government. So what's the current status of those fish that were caught in 2015? Well, we're still waiting for all the results to come in. We've got different body parts out for different types of analyses, and in each analysis, you can think of it as like a piece of the puzzle. We can put together a few of those pieces and maybe think we know what the picture is, but we really do have to wait until we have all the pieces together. We've put the puzzle pieces together, and then we can see what the picture is telling us. What we're hoping to get from those multiple analyses is some evidence to eliminate some hypothesis of potential arrival. Where did the fish come from? When did they arrive? Right now, though, we can say there's no evidence of establishment in Canadian waters. And the silver lining from a lot of work that was put in last summer, that the training and came in handy. We were prepared. We're updating protocols. We're doing more training using lessons learned from 2015 so that we're completely ready for what 2016 brings us this year. Moving on to the last pillar of the program, management. As I said, really the purpose of this pillar is to focus on the management of pathways that could introduce Asian carps to the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes. And one of the highest risk pathways in Canada was the live trade. If you remember, I did indicate that 2 of the species, grass carp and bighead carp, were found in live trade. Now, the province of Ontario did ban those species from live possession and sale in 2004. However, import, which is a federal responsibility, was not covered by those provincial regulations. So this past year, in 2015, the National Aquatic Invasive Species Regulations came into force. And these regulations strengthened our ability to prevent the introduction, spread, and establishment of aquatic invasive species, including Asian carps. So it really does focus on prohibiting import, transport, possession, and spread of high-risk invasive species, and Asian carp is listed in those regulations specifically. The regulations also provide tools such as the ability to conduct eradication or containment for invasive species listed in the regulations, and those tools can be used by the provinces, territories, as well as the federal government. Moving to the last third of the presentation, we are looking at what we're going to do this coming year. So this is our final year of the program, and we want to continue with the momentum that we've developed over the past few years. So looking at the different pillars of the program, and prevention being the first one, we do plan to continue the outreach and education to increase awareness of the threat these species pose to the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes, and we want to increase the engagement of Canadians to report suspected sightings. looking for a rare species, such as a new arrival of aquatic invasive species, is really is literally needle in the haystack. We need as many eyes on the water as possible, and we really are working to encourage Canadians to report suspected sightings so that we have as early warning as possible of the arrival of these species. We'll continue doing installation of additional billboards in the high traffic areas, development of a resource user survey, so we're looking at better understanding boat movement in the Great Lakes, as well as increased targeted outreach campaigns with our partners. In terms of our risk assessment work, we will be presenting those final results of the binational grass carp risk assessment to Great Lakes management agencies. And this work will provide managers the opportunity to clarify what the results mean to their specific area of the Great Lakes Basin and to gain useful advice for prioritizing their management activities. We will also in this last year conduct the binational ecological black carp risk assessment for the Great Lakes. The research that will be conducted this coming year, we'll be doing very similar research that was conducted for the grass carp risk assessment, only on black carp, and use that information to inform the risk assessment. We are collaborating with the University of Southern Illinois on a study of the use of carbon dioxide as a barrier mechanism. And we'll be finalizing all the research that has been conducted over the last several years on the movement and barrier mechanisms. We're also working on refinement of tributaries at risk. So while we had a first cut analysis done of the tributaries at risk, of course, as we know more and more about Asian carp and the biology and what they are capable of, we need to continue refining that information in our models so that we can work with different agencies to better pinpoint some of our activities with respect to the tributaries in the Canadian waters of the Great Lakes. In terms of our early warning surveillance program, we will continue our focus on those fixed early detection sites. We are going to ground truth a few more tributaries that have been identified as high risk in the Eastern Lake Ontario Basin. We want to determine their suitability to become one of our fixed early detection sites. We will have an additional boat out on the water this year, and that will increase our sampling efforts. And we have new gear that we're going to be incorporating into the program. We want to complement the work. We want to keep the gear that we're using, but we need to start looking at other gear and assess them for egg and larval sampling. So we'll be looking at the use of bongo nets and light traps. In terms of response, we'll continue to respond in collaboration with our partners to Asian carp captures in the Great Lakes. And the response protocols for use within the program, we'll continue to refine them with lessons learned from our previous experiences. And in use for this final year, we're going to have a database that will enable rapid assessment of what equipment is available for response near the area of a capture. Time is of the essence in these kind of scenarios, and to better understand what equipment we have and available and where it's available will save us a lot of time. In terms of management, we did do a data compilation on what the live trade was 5 years ago with respect to Asian carp into Canada. We wanted to dig into the data and analyze that to provide support for enforcement agencies of both Canada and the U.S. And when they can use that information to prevent the movement and potential introduction through live trade. Yes, it's illegal, but we know that some illegal things do occur, and we just want to do a follow-up and make sure we're not seeing any movement of Asian carp in the Great Lake or in through the trade. So where are we at? Well, we've had many successes within the Asian Carp Program. We've got the word out, we've increased awareness and reporting, we have a better understanding of the risks and how to direct our activities, we've increased our preparedness, and there's more tools available to us to prevent the introduction, establishment, and impact of Asian carp in the Great Lakes. A lot of these activities we're implementing with our partners, which we're really grateful for. And very specifically, we're very prepared for this coming year. We've got a plan in place, and we'll be implementing it as soon as the ice is out. And overall, we've built a really good foundation based on the successes and lessons learned from the Asian Carp Program. What that means maybe for the future is that we need to think about continuing to protect what we have achieved in the face of what's always changing, the species in the pathways with respect to aquatic invasive species in the Great Lakes. You never know what's on the horizon and what's next. I'm really proud of the work that has been done to date on behalf of the Government of Canada, on Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and on behalf of Canadians. And I really just want to take the time to acknowledge the team of people that work on the Asian Carp Program. Aaron and Dave, our biologists with the program, Darcy and Alex, our technicians with the program, and of course our very many casuals and our federal student work employment experience program students. We hire a lot of students from colleges and universities and employ them throughout the summer to work with us on research as well as early detection surveillance activities. So really just wanted to acknowledge the team effort that goes into this. So with that, I want to thank you everybody for listening. It's always difficult to do a presentation over the phone and even more difficult to listen to it over the phone. But I appreciate your patience, and I guess Christine will move on to questions. And I also have my email address there. I'm happy to answer anything. Just feel free to contact me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becky. That was really a great presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else did. We do have some time for a few questions. I know that some people have put them into the question box, and just a reminder for anybody who didn't hear, if you have a question, please enter it in the question box and I'll read it out for Becky to answer. So we'll go ahead with the first ones that have been entered. Becky, question about grass carp and their feeding habits. Somebody's asking if they feed on cladophora algae or the food that's harbored in that algae. Do you know much about that?
So grass carp eat macrophytes, so they eat large plants. The species that may be interested in eating cladophora would be silver carp, but what we found is what you might think is, oh great, they would eat cladophora and we'd solve that issue. Unfortunately, the response mechanism of cladophora when they are consumed is to grow a little more. So I don't think grass carp would find specifically cladophora that interesting, but certainly silver carp might.
Okay, good to know. My next question for you is, the biological samples that you were discussing that you were having assessed in various places, and the ones that you're assessing in Canada, where exactly are those being assessed?
So we were lucky enough to find a lab at the University of Windsor, so that's where some of that work is being done. What I'm told is that the unique compilation of equipment in that lab is only one of 2 in the world. And when I found out the one was in Germany, I thought, great, I'm on a plane to Germany to take these Asian carp stuff there. But then found out the second one was in University of Windsor. So we've been really grateful to work with the folks at University of Windsor, and they're busy as we speak, actually, analyzing some of those parts. We also send samples to Sault Ste. Marie, so Fisheries and Oceans Canada there in Sault Ste. Marie, and we conduct some analysis here in Burlington as well. So those are the Canadian parts.
Okay. Next question then. On the slide that you were showing the reports of Asian carp, slide 46, somebody has indicated where there was 141 reports. Do you know how many of these were actually Asian carp that were reported and how many were false reports? That was in 2013, since then.
Okay, so all the reports were Asian carp. They do receive calls about other invasive species. Very few were actually turned out to be an Asian carp for sure. I'm going to say 2 to 3.
Okay.
2, I
think. And you may have answered this one question already, but I'm just going to read it out. while the emphasis of the presentation has focused on prevention, has there been work conducted on what happens if any of the carp species get into the lakes? Is there enough food available, for instance?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I'd need a whole hour just to talk about the results of the risk assessment. That information is in the risk assessments that we've conducted. So we do very specifically look at that question. The 2011 risk assessment for bighead and silver carp is available online, and the grass carp risk assessment will be available this year.
Great. Question about the DFO's support for the recommended physical barrier being built by USIS at Chicago to prevent the entry of via the Mississippi River. Do you know what their statement is on that, whether they support that?
So I'm going to assume they're talking about the new barrier location. They're working at Brandon Road, which is just south of the current electrical barrier. So that work is overseen by a committee of U.S. and Canadian agencies that's termed the Asian Carp Regional Coordinating Committee. And DFO is an active member of that committee. And so that's where we have those discussions and we provide the input, and very supportive of all the work that the U.S. is doing. I do think we need to recognize that while we are concerned about Asian carp, looming in our backyard, the U.S. is dealing with Asian carp on their doorstep. They're in a completely different place than us, and the amount of work that's done there to protect the Great Lakes is staggering. So we do significantly work with the U.S. and we do have a voice at the table that discusses all those activities.
Great. So that kind of answers the question about how much you work with the U.S. on this project and the whole program. And as far as this program, it's in its last year, you were stating, do you know what's going to happen after that, the next year, what the work is going to be done?
No, we don't know what we're going to do come, I guess, April 2017. We do hope to continue to work with our partners, and we hope they're going to continue the fight to keep the species out of the Great Lakes. We do know there's more that could be done. We're looking at, we built a foundation of prevention, but we do need to think about moving towards operational and management activities. And of course, we could build upon the solid foundation we've built to address other aquatic invasive species in the Great Lakes, which is Canada's AIS hotspot. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the future has in store for us. But in the meantime, we're focusing on this upcoming field season, this upcoming year, and making sure we're ready.
Okay. And I noticed that, I remember over the summer when the grass carp were found in the Toronto area, and there was some concern that people were identifying common carp instead of grass carp in some of the reports. Do you know, is there an easy way to tell the difference between grass carp and common carp that people can identify? Sorry, I can't hear you, Becky. Are you still on the call?
Yeah, sorry, I had stuck myself on mute.
Okay.
So I was anticipating this question because we do get it a lot. The grass carp and common carp do look a lot alike at first glance, but two things to look for. And if people are just looking in the water and not wanting to touch them, the best way to look is the length or the width of the dorsal fin. On a grass carp, it's very short along its body, and you can see on a common carp, it's actually quite long along its body. If you do angle it or pull it out, the fish, the second identifying feature to look for are these small, like a little whisker at the corner of a mouth. If there is one, it's a common carp. If there isn't one and it has this short dorsal fin, it's likely a grass carp. More information on identification can be found at the Invading Species website. the awareness program, as well as asiancarp.ca. So recommend people to check those 2 sites out for identification.
Great. Question about the buffalo species that you were using as a surrogate. So when you were monitoring and testing the nets and that sort of thing, and you were pulling in, you said over, I think it was 1,300 buffalo species in the one grouping that you did, is there any way to determine, based on the number of fish that you were able to harvest from that, or at least pull out from the lake and then put back in, if you were to take grass carp and find grass carp out there, could you estimate based on that how many might be in the lake based on the population of buffalo species in the lake right now?
So we use buffalo species as a surrogate for bighead and silver carp, not for grass carp. I don't think with the numbers that we have found here in the Great Lakes, grass carp, that we could model that. But I'm not a modeler, and I'll admit that. But there is work being done on how many would it take to establish a population. So there's that work being done. Our surrogate for grass carp is common carp, and I don't think that would be a useful surrogate to do that kind of work, to try to predict the numbers out there, because there's just so many of them, like so many common carp.
Right. Okay, well that's great. I think we're pretty much out of time here. We have just 1 minute to wrap up. I'd like to say thank you, Becky, for taking your time to provide this really great presentation, very informative, and discussing the activities and successes for the Asian Carp Program. I'd also like to encourage everyone to visit our website at asiancarp.ca for more information about Asian carps and announcements about future webinars that might be happening. Hope you all enjoyed the webinar. Have a great day. Hope to see you at the next one.
Thanks, Christine.